Hi friends! So this is our video about the interface on Vectorworks in general. We're going to start over with the panels. I'll go through the panels around your screen and then I'll talk about how to get to the different parts of a drawing in the software. So for our example, we are using the Hunchback of Seville drawing, which you will have downloaded from Canvas. Once that opens, you should be in a screen that looks like this or very close to like this. So that's where we'll start. Over here on the side, we have our basic tools, the rectangles and circles and shapes and connections that you would have for drawing. And then we have specialty tool sets. Again, we talked a little bit about this before. It can be hard to see all of these tools, right? They're a little squished. Your screen hopefully is a little bit bigger than the screen real estate I'm recording right now, so you should be able to pull this open enough, or it should come open enough that you can see everything in it. Over here on the side are different icons that stand for different tool sets. They're arranged in I don't know why exactly this order. So you'll just want to take a minute and go through them. These icons all updated pretty significantly from the older versions of Vectorworks. So if you haven't worked in Vectorworks since 2022 or so, these are all different pictures than they used to be. So we'll just quickly go through them so that you know what's in each of these bins. One of them here is, and we just hover over it, it'll tell you what it is. And that's true for almost every icon on the screen, is if you hover over it, you will get that little text bubble that tells you what it is. So our first one is audio and video tools. So these are projectors, projection screens, LED surfaces, cameras, and then also it looks like speaker arrays are in there as well. Then our next one is going to be our lighting tool set. This one will be pretty significantly used and heavily used by our lighting designers. So it includes a bunch of the specific tools that are used for lighting. The next panel is cable. So it has your cable tool, your cables like legends and schedules and all of that kind of stuff. So if you're a sound designer in particular, this is really valuable in terms of drawing cable plans and line and block drawings. But also if you're a master electrician and you want to map out where all the cable is running, this can be really valuable. There's a whole set of tools here that we will probably barely, if at all, touch on in this class, that allow you to do that planning in a very detailed way, so that, for example, you're working on a big arena show, it will let you plan all of your cable, it'll count up how much you need, it'll produce all of the inventory that you would order from a shop, etc. So that's all in that tool set. The next tab over is all of the trusses and grid tools and lighting pipes and lighting ladders. These are different from just drawing a pipe in 3D because they have built-in characteristics that are used for lighting, and that's something that we'll look at a little bit later if you do the lighting sequence. There are also all of these rigging tools. I don't know if there are more to scroll down to, not really. There are all of these rigging tools that allow you to calculate loads using the software. They've incorporated Braceworks, which is the external tool to do that. Event, which is strange, it looks like a little stage. The one that looks like a little stage is useful for us because it includes some standard platforms and stairs. So if you're just throwing together some steel deck, these are really convenient ways to build those components. It also includes the seating tool, which is where all of these chairs came from, and which helps manufacture seating layouts. It has some railings that are specifically relating to the structure of a set or a events setup. I don't know why the fence is here, but it is. And rope and stanchion. So this is kind of a mix between the stuff we use all the time in theater and other event-related tools. The next one is ConnectCAD schematics. I've not really used this, but it looks like it's another tool for cable layouts and also block diagrams or drafting for the purposes of setting up system design, which is really important. The next one, again, I don't use this, ConnectCAD layout. So both of these are part of that planning toolkit. Cable routing, same, right? These tools exist in these other palettes, some of them, but that's what that one is. Building shell I use a lot. I use the doors, the windows, the wall tool when I'm creating scenery. So there are a lot of those components, and we'll use them when we do our theater drafting project. This is all of your 3D modeling tool sets. So if you're a person who came to me from the land of 3D modeling, all of your sort of push-pull and other sort of shaping tools are here for 3D things. This is the tool set around rendering. So it'll say visualization when you hover over it. And it has a lot of various RenderWorks tools for creating visual renderings. And I'll show you a little bit of that in this drawing, but it's not in this extensively. The next tool set is standardized furniture. So this is really for an architect planning offices more than it is for us, but they are plug-in objects of furnishings, and some of them have editable styles. So that's that guide, and it looks like the little table. We use this a lot, dimensions and notes. So this is where you get all of your tools for your dimensioning, to update your drawings, to label your drawings, all of that business. This is structural, like I-beams, all of that kind of stuff. We do not really mess with that a whole lot. These are your fasteners, which we, again, don't typically draft a lot of fasteners unless we're doing details for a rigging layout. And then machine components. So if you need detail in that respect, they're there. But we're not using this last bit very much. And we're not using this a whole lot in this class, but we'll come back to it. So those are the standard tool sets that come with the software that you're going to get. And they change the organization of these tools, and the access to them changes depending on which of the workspaces you're in. So again, at the very beginning or in the last video, we went down into workspaces. I only have these two, right? I only have Spotlight and Fundamentals, but you'll have Designer and Architect, right? So those are all different specific tools that are for individual career tracks and pathways. So the more of them that you get or need, the more of your money Vectorworks gets to take from you in order for you to have access to them. The next panel here is your attributes. That's your fills and line color. It's like your line color and your fill color. There's a little effects thing with drop shadows that I absolutely never use. Let's go across the top real quick. So this is previous view, next view. If you're using saved views or if you're tabbing through a document in that way, this is the way that you can operate all of that. Then you'll see screen plane and unified view buttons. Hopefully those show up on your screen. And those are something we can get into a little bit more as we start drawing. That's different modes of looking at the objects on the screen. Align plane, again, we'll get to that. That allows you to choose the surface that you're building off of as you're working in 3D. And then saved views, and when you twirl it open, there are not a lot of saved views here, but we can add those as we go. And on other drawings that I have done, I've included saved views. Saved views are great because they allow you to navigate quickly to different parts of a drawing. So it's pretty useful at times. And it also will save layer and class settings, which we'll talk about next. The next few are also visible, or options that you can play with on this panel here in navigation, and that's where I think I'm going to start, and then we can come back to see those duplicated and navigatable up here in this layers and classes section. The little teapot is your visualizer mode. So if you see, and they've actually given us little icons to demonstrate what each of those teapots might mean. We'll be starting out in wireframe, although it doesn't look like that right now because you're in top plan view. That's my default that I work in because it runs really quick. The other one that we'll often use is shaded, which is like a very quick massing of 3D shapes, as opposed to a final, beautiful rendering with lighting and all of that kind of stuff. So those are the two that are most useful as you're building your drawing, and then once you're trying to create renderings, you can get into some of these other ones, okay? The hidden line versions are super valuable for draftings because they'll create really clear plans, and we'll talk about that more once we start taking 3D objects and exporting them to print in individual plates. So that is that tab right there. There are plan rotations, which I often will use. There's now a little text bubble, and these are all written underneath so you can see them. There's your snaps that live here. You can temporarily suspend snaps if that's helpful to you. There's a settings tab, and then there are these couple of zoom and view options. The really useful one here is going to be these two, which are fit to page area and fit to objects, and those are super valuable in the case where something like this happens, right? Where you're like, oh shit, I lost, I don't know where did my thing go? And that is a thing that will happen to you with some frequency, is you're like, I don't know, I lost the drawing. I don't know, I'm someplace out in space and I don't have my picture anymore. But if you say, oh, fit to the page, right? It will bring you back to wherever you were, right? So it'll either bring you back to whatever object is selected, or it'll bring you back to your page boundaries, and that's super valuable. Our resource manager floated away at some point this morning when I was fixing this drawing. So that is this panel that floats above your drawings. It tends to either go, sometimes I'll put it on another monitor, although that's not as useful. Usually I just kind of float it over the file name in my top bar because otherwise it's getting in the way of my other stuff. The Resource Manager is basically a folder that contains all the stuff in your show. In my case, it is not perfectly organized, right? You're going to see a bunch of the textures that I've used. You're going to see different wall styles and some objects and some people and like scattered stuff, a text style, a vent chair, right? The bed for the bed, the table for the table, right? All of those things live here. Different marbles, things that I tried. There's a lot of stuff that's floating around in this resource folder that I'm not even using, that's not relevant to me anymore. And you can clean all of that out at some point if you feel like it or you get to it. And then there are additional sort of styles and settings that live in the folders. You'll notice up here there are open files, so I can go to my resource manager to access open files over here on the side, and then there are also Vectorworks libraries. So when Vectorworks said, do you want me to download and update the libraries, what they meant were all of these folders. So these folders can be super valuable to you because they have in them, for example, lighting instruments, like every lighting instrument on the market, or nearly, right? So if you're like, I am a lighting designer and I need some ETC source 4s, right? All of those source 4s with all of their attributes are living in these folders in the Resource Manager libraries, right? Similarly, things like event tools, right? Or a bunch of different furniture, right? A bunch of different staging equipment. So a lot of that stuff is available, which is really valuable because then you don't have to start completely from scratch. You have a lot of plugins. So that's your Vectorworks library access. This is your existing file. If you have more than one file, it's very easy to go to like the file next door, grab a door, bring it into the file you're working in, things like that. So that can be very helpful. So that's your resource manager. If you want to keep it popped open for some reason, you hit the little plus sign. And if you want to make it disappear automatically, you hit the little minus sign. And if you hit the X, it's gone now. You closed the panel because it was in your way and you were frustrated. But now when I say go to your resource browser, you're going to be like, I don't know where the resource manager is. It's gone. I hit the X, it went away, it's lost. And in that case, you go over here to Window, Palettes, and you scroll down until you see Resource Manager, and then it will return. So that is there for you when you are lost. Go back to your Window, Palettes, and make sure you haven't hit a little X that lost a tool that you did actually need. It was just in the moment in the way of the thing you thought you were trying to do. So that's your resource manager. Over here you have your object info, and right now nothing is selected, but I'll just pick, you know, a random item. I'll pick this bed. Let's select it. So once I have an object selected, I can go down the side over here. I see that there's a class, which is one kind of sorting. There's a layer, which is where it lives, like what stack of paper in the drafting it lives on. This has a name because it's a 2D, 3D symbol. So it has a name, which I can cross-reference and find it in the resource manager, also having the name full bed canopy. Full bed canopy, there it is, right? So same object listed over here. Rotation is what rotation it is relative to the way that it lives. Options of scaling and replacing it with other symbols are all available here. There are some times render features. If you go across your tabs, the render tab is the other one in the object info that we'll use frequently. This also is going to give you a location in space. And if it is a different kind of object, I don't know if I have something that's not sort of symbolized at the moment. But let's just quickly draw a rectangle for fun. So if it's a different kind of object like a rectangle, then it's going to have more information, different information, but the useful one there is your width and your height. So I said I made a rectangle, but I made a special one. It's a square. It came out square, but your height and width, and these are editable, so I can be like, I actually want it to be 6 feet wide, and I can hit enter, and now it's only 6 feet wide and 9 foot 3.797 inches tall. The other thing about that is you can choose where the edit, like these, this is your anchor point. So if I wanted it to shrink in and not move from its placement in the space, I can use that to give me those sort of specific changes relative to a point. So that is that object info panel. And again, it doesn't have a lot of render options, but there will be more as we go through this work. Delete your rectangle. And then navigation design layers. So navigation is the name of the panel, and then there are these 6 tabs underneath. The first one is classes, which is a way of organizing objects that can impart styles upon them. And it's going to tell me this every time, and I'm going to just keep clicking OK for the moment. But if that pop up after you read it, if you don't want it, you can have it not show it to you anymore. So classes are kind of subcategorization options of different things within a drawing. So sometimes I'll have things that I want to be able to hide independently. Sometimes I'll have things that I want to always be grouped together so that if I wanted to turn them all green at once, I could if they have the same class. Most of the drafting that we'll do will use the none class, but then some items we will give specific classes. You can also use classes, and I've done this a lot. You can use classes to help sort different acts of a show, right? So if I have a different set for the first act and the second act, or for different scenes of the show, I might be using classes to keep all of those things separate, or to place things on one side of the stage for one moment and then give them their location in offstage storage in the next scene. So there might be duplicate items that are in different classes, so I can turn them on and off in groups. So those are classes. There's visibility inside of that. So there are 3 options for a class. We can look at set, that works. So if I gave something the set class, it would turn off. I didn't give anything the set class. I didn't use it. So it's just the doors of the shop for some reason that are in the set class. So when I hit in the center column of nothingness, right, there are no headers here. There's an eyeball on the left. That's visible, obviously. There's an X in the middle, which is invisible or turned off. And then there is a shaded eyeball for grayed out. So grayed out is now hitting anything that is the set, right, class, and then back here brings things back to the on position. So you can turn on and off individual classes here. I also have, and you'll see there's a whole bucket of them on the side a bunch of different layers. And layers are, the reason we call them layers, and these are specifically design layers, which it says here, I'm a design layer, right? Is that traditionally in drafting, in order to organize your file and in order to organize your show, you have many different sheets, and they were drawn on vellum, which is semi-transparent, so that you could stack the layers up on top of each other and look through them to the stuff that's below them, but be drawing only the one specific type of thing. This is important if you have a set and then a light plot, right? You're going to have the set designer is going to make the layer for the set. They're going to put that down, and then you as the lighting designer are going to put your vellum over top of it and draft your lighting relative to that location. That's why they're called layers. It's also why they stack in a particular order. And this is not quite big enough to see everything. Oh, it is. You just have to move it around. So there are a whole bucket of layers that I have given you, right? In your template file, you'll find some of them. And in my folder, I have a bunch of different things, right? I tend to put the floor as its own layer so that I can turn it off and back on. And then I put the audience on top of the floor because that's what's next. Then I put the scenery. Then I put anything that's overhead, like practicals. I have those lanterns. Then I have the masking as its own layer that I can turn off and on. Then I have a video layer in case there's video design. Then I have a grid. So there's the lighting grid, or at least the tension grid layout for the experimental. I think this is only a 2D layer, but ideally that would be a 3D layer that would have all of the lighting positions, right? Or you would have a lighting layer that that you would place on top of that. And then I have a few other additional layers that I've created to help organize my drawing, but that I don't want to see all the time. So one of them is this platform layout for the technical direction side, where I'm like, here's the way we might use our steel deck to do this, right? Then I have a drafting layer, which we'll talk about a whole lot more at a later date. And then lastly, I have a rendering layer, again in design layers. The rendering is about, you'll see all of these little sort of alien spaceship things pop up. These are render lights. I don't need them on all the time. They kind of slow down the rendering when I'm working in a 3D mode or whatever. So those are on the render layer. Okay, let's take a break. Next column. So our next tab is our sheet layers. So sheet layers are draftings. Like this right here is a piece of paper, right? It comes at a specific size, and then inside of it is a title block, and then inside of that are snapshot views of the scenery. I've also tossed a bunch of pictures onto this ground plan layer so that that's all available. You'll notice I'm zooming in and out. I am using the scroll wheel on the mouse, right? Another important tip with this is, like, if I've zoomed into this point and now I want to move around, I'm going to click and hold on the scroll wheel. My cursor turns into the hand tool temporarily, lets me move the drawing, right, by clicking and dragging with the scroll wheel so that I'm able to make my way around the drawing without having to, like, go find scrolling and figure out how to get wherever I'm supposed to be, or having to zoom out, point my mouse at the thing I want, and zoom in. Okay? Terrifying dead bodies and body parts. Cool. So that is a navigation tip, right? The next one is a section. So again, I have a title block. I have individual section or elevation views, the front elevation of this set, a section view of this set. Section being sliced through the middle. Platform elevations, so these are your draftings for all of the platforms and stairs. Wall elevations, these are all of the walls. You'll notice they have these red like diagonal lines across them. If you select them all, and I just did that by dragging a box around them, and then you hit update, they will all become solid again. So that's a tip for being able to see what's going on, right? So that makes it basically is refreshing the rendering of that object. So that would be right there. And then I have these down at the bottom, which we did see in our template file, and those are your different size pages for printing, and I used them to create various things that would print at various sizes and that I didn't actually include in the exported drafting package for the show. So in the exported drafting package, I really just showed the first 4 sheets. Those are PDFs that are also in box for my technical director and everybody else to work from. But then we have a bunch of other sort of side projects. I just need this to make the model. I just need this for whatever reason so that I can print things accurately. Sheet layers, unlike our design layers, which is a 3D model, right? I don't know if you can tell that from here, but if you hit Shift-C, it will pick up your 3D flyover tool. And it's like, did you know that you can do that? I'm like, I do know that, but I'm not going to ever do that. And hit Shift-C, which is a keyboard shortcut instead. Okay. Now I have a little spinny arrowy thing, a little recycling button on my cursor. And that means I can click and drag, and I'm looking at a 3D model, right? So that is how I sort of fly around the object. Now that I got that going, ooh, fun. Let's look at some of the other settings that we might change in order to see into it better. And then we can kind of come back to this later as we get to it in the process of our work. So let's do a little bit of, I'm flying around things in 3D because that's fun. So Vectorworks has added this lovely little tool here on the side when you're in flyover mode or even when you're not, that lets you quickly change to standard views, right? So those are there. They're also up here in this menu, but it can be quicker to snap to them. And again, I'm clicking and dragging with my scroll wheel on my mouse to get around or to move around. I can do that also on this object, or I can snap to a specific view. Now, I'm looking at a wall, which is not the most useful, but this wall luckily has its own class set up so I can turn it off. So if I come down to theater walls, and it's going to be like, did you know that? I do know that, but they might not know. So we can come down here to walls, and then we just have to like remember which wall is which. That one is not it. We're looking for the west wall. So if I turn off the west wall, now I can see into the theater, okay? The view I'm looking at, or the render mode that I'm looking at right now is hidden line, and you can see that up above. So it's basically hiding anything and making it sort of a clean line drawing of the drafting, which is helpful, or of the model. So I can kind of fly around the set by clicking and dragging. If I want to see a little bit more of the texture and detail that some nice designer put into this drawing, I can switch to shaded. And now it has a quick, here's what colors and textures everything has added to it. So that is super helpful as I'm trying to sort of understand how it feels in 3D space. This does not have people in it right now. It will if I turn on over here in navigation the rendering layer, because in addition to these little render lights that you can almost kind of see some of that smoke. I don't know if you can see it on your computer, but it's showing you that sort of volume of light, but it's also added in a couple of nice sort of cutout paper doll ladies that I stole from Elizabeth's slides. So those are part of my rendering. I would want in a rendering to be able to see what the scale of a person is, or to be able to show that information to a director. So that exists in that mode. Okay. So I think that that's a pretty good baseline review, or first introduction to how you would navigate a drawing. There is a fun scavenger hunt for you to try and find some stuff. I will also direct you to, if we look over here, because probably not all of you took my class, if we look over here on the ground plan itself, I'm nicely zoomed in, I'm going to remind you that on the ground plan, right, you will see a bunch of these little drawing labels, okay? And the drawing labels direct you to viewports, which are in the sheet layers over here in your elevations. So each of these drawing labels is pointing at an object. So let's look at, as the example, this one here is pointing at this wall, and it says that it's going to be A on sheet 4. So A is the drawing number or the drawing label, and then 4 on the bottom of that is the sheet that it lives on. So now if I go over to sheet 4 and I go look for A, now I have a front elevation of that object, and it's matching. This A here is what is showing up over there. So that A is equal to the ground plan's label for this piece of scenery. So as you work your way around or go through the scavenger hunt, you may be looking to see, okay, wall E, which is this and also that, they're reverse and repeat, so it's the same object drawn, built twice, is on sheet 4, so I can go find it on sheet 4 in order to get more detailed information about it. If I'm looking for this wall, which has a door in it and a window in it, I'm going to also look on sheet 4 for that, but I'm going to go look for drawing C. Or if I'm looking for the P, the platform, this is its drawing label P over 3, so it's living on sheet 3, and the detailed information about it will be there. That is your orientation. Hopefully this makes sense. Jump into that scavenger hunt assignment, see if you're able to find all of the answers to the questions, and I will be here to help if you get lost or you need more explanation. All right, thanks friends. See you in the next video. Bye.